So it's the middle of 2020, and if you clicked on this video, you're probably thinking about buying a new phone and don't want to spend a ton of money doing it. In a way, your timing is kind of great. Mid-range smartphones are better than they've ever been, and more than a few of them punch way above their weight. The process of picking just the right one can feel a bit daunting at times though, but that's why we're here to help. To start, let's lay down a few ground rules. For our purposes, we generally consider a mid-range phone to be a device in the $250 to $500 price range. Anything below that comes with some considerable trade-offs, and anything above $500 starts getting into what I think of as budget flagship territory, but that is a story for another time. Personally, I've had great luck with services like Swappa and Backmarket for pre-owned devices, but that's not for everyone. So today, we'll focus on devices you can buy brand new in box right now. Engadget also has a primarily American audience, so I'm not going to highlight devices from brands like Honor or Xiaomi or Realme. Not that we have anything against these manufacturers or their phones, quite the opposite actually. It's just that differences in things like network band support and warranties mean they're tougher to recommend for most regular people. Now, if you're sort of a classic Engadget fan and you have a pretty solid grasp of what you want out of a smartphone, then you are more than welcome to skip ahead to see our picks. But if you're really starting from scratch or just want a refresher on things to keep in mind as you start smartphone shopping, just stick with me for a bit. The first thing to sort out is your carrier situation. AT&T and T-Mobile offer you the most flexibility in that you can use phones they sell directly or most unlocked phones with near full compatibility. I should mention, if you do decide to go the unlocked device route, you'll have to do a little bit more legwork, but a few Google searches should tell you if the model you're looking at is compatible with the company you're paying gobs of money to. Verizon is a little different as it only supports some unlocked phones, so if you're already a customer of theirs, you're generally safer buying a phone straight from them. This is the point in the video where I note that Verizon is Engadget's parent company, but they have no control over what we say or how we say it. To help keep things simple though, all of the devices we recommend below are compatible with all of the major US wireless providers. Next, we recommend taking some time to sort out where you stand on the 3 Ps. First up, platform, which should be an easy one. Do you go Android or iOS? There's a decent chance that you already have a preference or some experience with one over the other, so I would strongly recommend you go with whatever feels familiar and comfortable to you. If you haven't used either, well, this is the point where I suggest you do a little extracurricular research. Broadly speaking though, if openness and customization and the ability to install basically whatever you want are important to you, Android and its flexibility are probably a better fit. Apple's iOS, meanwhile, really shines in its ease of use, especially for beginners, and its tight integrations with everything else the company makes mean that if you own literally any piece of Apple hardware, an iPhone is almost certainly the way to go. Next up, priorities. What do you want your new phone to be really good at? Battery life, camera performance, pure horsepower? Ideally, the mid-range phone for you will be at least solid in all of these departments, but make note of which of these factors are especially important to you. Hell, jot them down on a list and rank them. I strongly recommend lists. And last, there's price. Even though we've narrowed down the options to devices that cost between $250 and $500, there's still a lot of wiggle room in that range. What is the most you'd feel comfortable spending on your smartphone? Mid-range phones tend to use slightly older components or more modest ones compared to the premium stuff, so it's worth buying a device towards the top end of what you can afford because those little differences in performance between a $500 phone and a $300 phone count for a lot over the long haul. I should also mention that this guide looks mainly at a phone's full retail price, but in many cases, there's a decent chance you'll be able to pay for whatever device you choose over time through an installment plan with your wireless carrier. That was a lot of preamble, but if you've stuck with me so far, I hope you found it helpful. Now let's get to our picks. If your biggest concern is taking great photos, you won't do much better than the $400 Google Pixel 3a and the $480 3a XL. Neither of these phones use interesting camera hardware. They are totally off-the-shelf parts used in countless other smartphones. What really makes them special are Google's tremendous computational photography chops, which turn that same raw sensor data into photos that frequently outshine the competition. The competition, by the way, is very stiff. The iPhone SE takes surprisingly great photos, but I generally prefer Google's Smart HDR and the way that tunes images. Meanwhile, Samsung's Galaxy A51 packs a whopping 4 rear camera sensors, but I found this phone's overall performance to be really flaky sometimes, so I left it off the list entirely. Beyond the cameras, the 3A and 3A XL are fairly standard mid-range phones. They use the same Snapdragon 670 chipset with 4 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of internal storage, which you can unfortunately not expand upon in any way. Despite those middle-of-the-road processors, both versions of the 3A run surprisingly smoothly thanks to a lot of diligent software optimization under the hood. And speaking of software, Google's Pixels are the first in line for big Android updates too, so these phones are a safer bet than most if you plan to hold off upgrading for a while. If we had to pick just one, it would be the Pixel 3a XL for its spacious 6-inch screen and its better battery life. I have to go on record here and just say the 3a XL is pretty much my favorite Android phone of all time. Conversely, the regular 3A and its 5.6-inch display make it a better choice for people with small hands. No matter which version of the 3A strikes your fancy though, it's definitely worth waiting for a deal. Both phones go on sale frequently, and they might get permanent price cuts when the new mid-range Pixel 4a launches later this summer, and we'll address that whole thing when we finally get to play with it. But what if your biggest concern is battery life? That shouldn't be a problem for the Moto G Power. With a 5,000 mAh battery tucked away inside, this $250 Android phone routinely lasts 2 full days off a single charge. And if you're the sort who uses your phone sparingly, hitting the 3-day mark is absolutely doable. The Moto G Power's longevity is easily its biggest selling point, but that's not to say it's a slouch at the other stuff. Motorola went with a 6.4-inch Full HD display that gives your photos and videos plenty of room to breathe, and this 16-megapixel main camera takes reasonably crisp, well-exposed photos when the lighting is good. I should mention the phone also packs ultra-wide and macro cameras if you want to mix up your shots a bit. You may notice some occasional choppiness when jumping between apps, but that's not unusual for something so modestly priced, and I think it's far from a deal breaker. I should also mention this is the only phone on our list of picks that supports expandable storage. You get 64 gigs of space to play with right out of the box, and you can add up to 512 more gigs with a micro SD card. All told, the Moto G Power's tremendous battery life and more or less solid performance make it perhaps the best $250 phone you'll find right now. But what if you just want a great, powerful all-rounder of a phone? If Android is your thing, I would point you to the $500 OnePlus 7 Pro, aka one of last year's flagship smartphones. Thanks to its Snapdragon 855 chipset and 6 gigs of RAM, it's by far the fastest Android phone on this list, and its super smooth bezel-less screen is the prettiest you'll find for the price. And did I mention how well built this phone is? The 7 Pro feels like a proper premium device. Throw in a clean, fuss-free version of Oxygen OS built atop Android 10, 128 gigs of storage, and a flexible triple camera system around back, and you've got what feels like the best all-around package in the Android pack. If nothing else, it's certainly the most future-proof. If there is one knock against the 7 Pro, it's that its battery life is merely okay, but thankfully the phone comes with a Warp Charge 30 charger that, in our experience, takes the phone from bone dry to full in about an hour. It's also a serious handful, so people with smaller hands might want to look elsewhere. So yeah, I really like this phone, but I should mention this pick does have an asterisk next to it. I would generally prefer to recommend the OnePlus 7T, which is available to T-Mobile customers for the same $500 as the OnePlus 7 Pro. It comes with 2 gigabytes of extra RAM at the base level, a slightly snappier Snapdragon 855 Plus chipset. I think it's a better deal. The issue is the unlocked version that OnePlus used to sell is currently out of stock, and I don't know when it's coming back. OnePlus has told me it will come back and it will sell for $499, so if you don't mind waiting, I would look at that. But if you're buying a phone right now, you're probably gonna wanna look at the 7 Pro instead. If you're truly open to smartphones of all stripes though, I really think you'll get the most out of Apple's iPhone SE. That's largely thanks to the company's choice of chipset. Unlike other phones in this price range that rely on dedicated mid-range processors, the $400 iPhone SE uses the same A13 Bionic found in the company's most expensive iPhones. That is enough to make the iPhone SE the fastest mid-range smartphone available right now by far. Multitasking, augmented reality, high-intensity games, the A13 helps the iPhone SE handle them all brilliantly. Even the single rear camera, which by the way uses a sensor that debuted over 2 years ago, takes startlingly good photos in most situations because of the serious image processing this chipset can perform. And as apps grow more complex, more sophisticated, the headroom this high-performance chip provides will really come in handy. In other words, all that power isn't just valuable now, it will remain valuable for years to come. With all that said, the iPhone SE isn't perfect for everyone. Its 4.7-inch Retina display is the smallest of the lot, its design is dated compared to everything else on this list, and you shouldn't expect much more than one full day of battery life. So, what does the SE offer to offset these shortcomings? For me at least, it's simple. It is the most future-proof phone in its price range. Apple has the longest hardware support timelines in the game, which means an iPhone SE you buy now will continue to get big software updates for years. The original iPhone SE, a device that launched in 2016, is still getting new software. Samsung, by comparison, typically only offers 2 years worth of major software updates. Same goes for Google and its Pixels, though it also provides those phones with 3 full years of security updates, which are slightly different. Beyond that, it's also worth noting the iPhone SE has lower screen and battery replacement costs than other new iPhones. It's cheaper to buy this thing, yes, but also cheaper to keep it going. For all of these reasons and more, the 2020 iPhone SE is our pick for the best mid-range smartphone for most people. So there you go, that's our list of picks. I think there's something good here for everybody, but if you've got choices of your own, if there's something you think we missed, please leave us a comment or email me at v8engadget.com. I'd love to see what you think. As always, thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.